Yes, we are live.
We're live. I've been working over the past couple of weeks, and so I started with a question of like, okay, should we have a type of auction marketplace for like completing tasks and services for robots? And I started building out vibe coding the kind of how this would go about, but then I ran into the issue, which is like a product is obviously very hard to design if you don't have like a very specific thing that you're trying to solve for, like a real thing. So I was like, I might as well try to find a real thing and then work backwards from that of where this like auction would fit and then what features and requirements you would need, which led me to a lot of interesting insights. I built the auction of a prototype of the marketplace auction. And then I went back and I went all the way backwards and I said, let me just build a website of a product, and then work backwards from that on what the product would, what the protocol would actually need to be able to fulfill the needs of this specific product. And after a bunch of automated research, the conclusion of kind of like the desk research was if you're going to start thinking about hiring robots, you should start thinking it started out suggesting sensors, but I was like, nah, like I don't think sensors is big business because most people would just buy their own sensors. You wouldn't like bid on using someone else's sensor. Maybe you would. I don't know. I just didn't buy it. Didn't pass the smell test. So instead, I went all the way into where do people spend money on equipment today? And that's actually construction, and where there's a highest level of maturity in robot adoption in construction is maybe not the highest level of maturity, but I do think that for autonomous equipment, that's actually site surveys. So they use a bunch of different stuff. So I'll talk through that. But so I said, okay, so what would it look like to have to do that? And so I deconstructed all this into a product. And the product is quite simple. General contractors basically upload RFPs, like in PDF form or text form, requirements. And that RFP, you can actually see like a real request for a quote here. This is like actual real, and this is based on real inference. The website itself is not actually running it, but this is actual real inference on a real proposal. Tells you what the requirements are for each of the specific tasks that need to be done, which then you can verify and publish. These specifically tell you like what the robot would need to do. This FAA Part 107, this means like you need to be a commercial drone certified operator, for example, licensed surveyor, and you can publish your auction. I also learned about you probably would need, the auction would probably need some sort of like either escrow service or legal commitment for a bond based on the approved bond that they have in place. I can talk about that in a little bit more, but then you can actually start your bidding. Robots and or operators, if they're connected to the auction marketplace, can automatically bid. You can review or reject, agree and commit, and then you would have to sign your services agreement, including a terms analysis, reviewing the general contractor required legal components versus the bidders, because the robots themselves also have legal accountabilities, insurance requirements, limitation of liability, and so on and so forth. And you'd be able to like check like a full legal analysis that would then allow you to execute the requirements and kind of like see what your robot costs would be, potentially a traditional estimate, what your savings would look like, and so on and so forth. This highlighted a lot of other stuff. For example, there's legal requirements for robot outputs too. So someone has to verify like what the robot actually did. In surveys in Michigan, I believe, I don't know if this is every state, I need to check. You do need a physical land surveyor, which is kind of like a professional role, like a notary, that says, hey, these documents are actually true and they actually reflect reality. They weren't like basically just made up. So I'm gonna pause there. There's an entire other workflow of what it would mean to register as an operator. So what equipment type you would have, accuracy levels, compliance requirements, the what your company registration would be, and then how you activate for bidding and so on and so forth. So how it basically works is there's an oversupply currently, apparently, of unused robots in general across the U.S. They're not fully autonomous equipment, but it's we expect it to become. And there is an underconnection with people who would probably use robot services, and then there's the auction marketplace, and what we've been talking about in open protocol would probably have significant impact if it was designed correctly and if we got to register a bunch of people. I'll pause for questions.
The construction industry, do you have like a good sense of how it's structured between like small scale handyman types all the way to large enterprise contractors and stuff like that? Because one of the things I'm wondering, uh, based on my own experiences looking at these kinds of markets, is the big business types, they do tend to be super conservative. Like they may use a lot of technology, but it tends to be like very mature with like a bunch of like incumbent oligopolists and things like that. Industrial robots is still Fanuc type robots that are like unchanged for 30, 40 years. So that's one concern. Whereas on the other hand, small to medium, maybe more, I don't know, the independent surveyor type you're talking about. Uh, Many of them I know already use like drones to take over aerial shots and stuff, so they're like quicker to adopt technology.
Yeah,
We it's important to find the right piece of this market because construction overall is huge. You don't want to try, I don't know, pitching automated cranes to people building skyscrapers. That's not.
that's right. That's right. And that's why at least the automated research I conducted. Obviously, all of this is like unvalidated. I haven't sat down and done interviews with like general contractors, even if I do have them like access to them right now. But so that's kind of like phase 2 of this. But the automated research and my reading and my review of it suggested that basically, so surveyors would be the right market. As you said, they've already adopted drones. And based on anecdotal evidence from my discussion with family members who work in construction, mid-sized general contractors who compete on low bid do adopt technology and are in pretty fierce competition for technology adoption, to lower their labor costs and be able to increase their profit margins. This is different. This is the market segment here is basically the contractors, especially the ones who are bidding for public works, which get the most benefit out of this. And even in Michigan in particular, there's state grants for including using innovative technology in your bid process. So anecdotal evidence from family members over the last 10 years suggests that they actually do this. But as you said, it's not automated cranes. we're talking about limited liability, like surveying.
Actually, there are courses specific to the US market. So I have taken a course on drone photography, but they
Yeah,
also provide courses specific to the US market regarding things like surveying what Rafa is
yeah,
talking about. So there is a
yeah.
market for.
Yeah, this is something I learned quite a bit about recently because we just bought a house. Drones for aerial shots is one. Another interesting one is there's this service called a sewer scope. So when you buy a house, you inspect the sewer line that goes to the main
That's right.
another
Yeah,
thing. And yeah, you can pay somebody a few $100 to come out and like run a sewer scope. And I watched the guy do it. He had like a big briefcase type thing with like a special monitor, and it's basically like an endoscope used for like endoscopic surgery,
that's right.
larger. And it's a very manual process, and the kit he was using looked like, I don't know, 1990s technology, an old screen with like a little black and white camera, and that's like almost begging for disruption. Like you
That's
should
right.
be able to send like a much more lightly tethered robot with like pivotable cameras and other instrumentation to, I don't know, even collect samples and stuff. So there's probably like 4 or 5 different types of things that either are already robots or could easily be robots. Another one I think might be um, small crawling robots that go into like tight crawl spaces to look for insulation damage and pest control, things like that. So there's
That's
probably a
right.
whole bunch like this.
Exactly. And the thing that was caught my eye too was that it's less likely to be able to hire these type, like the automation friction right now is potentially too high for individual house calls, but at a construction level, when you need to, I don't know, do a survey of I don't know how many acres or how many miles of piping, then suddenly like the technology trade-off looks a little bit different, right? But regardless, I mean, again, exploration. What was interesting, a couple interesting things that I'll talk about. The I'll talk about is that the one of the biggest gaps for the protocol was actually having machine readable tasks. So what I mean by that is I didn't realize how specific you would have to be, like like you have to specify not just location, but the task specification is like an entire rabbit hole or black hole of requirements. And there's different standard requirements, accuracy requirements, precision. There's timing requirements, and so when I was thinking about the auction, where you have to, if you think about meme coins, right, and you're looking at liquidity, you have an interchangeable like token that of liquidity. But when you have robot tasks, every task is a unique NFT. So your liquidity is actually really low at any given point because, especially now that you don't have like just general robots or whatnot. So you have this interesting push and pull between you need a extremely high level of specification, but you still want the bids to be feasible. And I don't know where that line of questioning will lead me, but it has already led into I'm trying to understand, for example, task standards in the construction industry for surveying specifically. Like if you're doing a photography of a property, it's not just photography. You need a certain specific resolution. You need a specific like file source. You need specific verifications and so on and so forth.
One thing worth thinking about is, again, I'm thinking about recent experiences. When we had to get insurance for this house, they gave us the option of either sending out somebody to take photos of the house. So this is clearly an insurance professional who knows which photos to take, or download an app, and then the app would direct us to take photos from specific angles or specific
That's
parts,
right.
right? So this is like it's the equivalent of low code or no code um, activities by humans. Like instead of having like a small group of very skilled people using specialized equipment, you have a much larger group of low skilled or no skilled ordinary people, lay people, using very general purpose equipment, and they both fulfill the same function.
That's
So
right.
and this is, I think, we are thinking about several dimensions, right? Teleoperation is operating from a distance. Another dimension is autonomy. Like for rovers on the moon and Mars, we think of like basically full autonomy because of the latency in sending commands. But there's a spectrum there. So full autonomy is something like you go on 8004 and find a robot that can do a full survey, click and pay it some money, and it goes and completely autonomously does the survey. The other extreme is when you click, what happens is actually a human expert takes the task and then uses a pretty dumb uh,
Machine. Yeah.
robot
Yeah.
do the task for you. That's basically just a task market like TaskRabbit. But
That's
there's a
right.
whole spectrum in between. You can say, all right, I don't need an expert, but this is also not completely hands off. I just need somebody with a car to pick up the suitcase from a storage location, bring it to the construction site, open the suitcase and press a button, and then the robot will do the rest. Right? That's halfway in between. So you kind of
Yeah.
think in that zone, I think.
Exactly. And then what I was thinking with this speculative product, why I really kind of liked it, was because it sits in between that spectrum, right? Like like a lot of the survey equipment is semi-autonomous, but it's moving towards more autonomous. The the research and development, anyways. And I kind of like the fact that it spans that. And if I was running this as a business with my North Star of basically driving lunar operations, you would have a certain accountability to shape the market in that direction, right? Like you would want to shape the market in that direction. You probably want to prioritize not just good reviews of the survey stuff, but good reviews that decrease costs through autonomous usage and so on and so forth. So you'd be shaping the market as you executed the product.
Along the same lines, another item I would put on your radar to think about is estimates. So this is all stuff I've learned in the last 3-4 weeks. Like just about any home improvement or repair thing you want to do. This is a very old house, 1954, so we have to do a lot of repairs. The process is invariably the same. You shop around for many people who know how to do whatever you want done. They will come out and do an estimate, which is just walking around and like judging stuff and like giving you an estimate. Then they do the work, right? Estimation seems to me like basically a smaller scale, specialized and localized version of surveying. It's like, you want the
Yes,
remodeled. Basically, somebody has to walk around looking at cabinets and floors and stuff like that. So it doesn't have to be a person. Like actually, many of them offer to do it through things like Zoom calls. But this seems like, yeah, estimation would be, yeah, not estimation in the engineering sense, but estimation in the sense of like cost estimation for projects. That seems like I don't know, low code teleoperable task. Like
yeah,
a very busy professional who charges like hundreds of dollars per hour, instead of coming out personally, they can say, I will mail you a robot, just set the robot loose in your kitchen and it'll do the estimation.
that's right. Yeah, and like imagine if they sent you via Amazon next day delivery, like a type of Roomba, and
Mhm.
the Roomba would just like crawl through the house and take fisheye pictures of everything, and then the visual interpreter would restructure that to a human readable video, and would tap on walls or like whatever it is, right, to check quality issues, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think this is very promising and a kind of good practical, I don't know, waypoint on the way to moon.
Yeah. So I'm going to show one last thing that I want to show is some meta information on some stuff that I learned while vibe coding. So let me share with you, share screen again. Okay, I'll send a link to, so this is a live auction demo. This, the auction server is running on my computer, but, and this will evolve into the next phase. You can also ask questions about the project. I learned how to create a custom chat which has access to the project context, which is kind of cool. But the idea here is I'm trying to get from live auction to actual payment settlement on the auction. So that's the next project that I'm working on, the next piece of the project. So just FYI, I'll send the link. You need to like copy paste the MCP server, which will be running on my computer to make it work. Any questions with regards to that? Just really quick. No? Okay. So last thing I'll say is that I was trying to figure out how to wrangle this project. So it is surprisingly difficult to do context management for a bunch of different agents that are constantly forgetting everything and have to remember stuff. So the orchestration of the project, I started using like building. This is very early days, but I think this is what it's going to mature to. Is this type of like product ontology that documents this imaginary business, including like the different sources. They created this interesting thing which is called like a bet chain, which is saying you need to verify this hypothesis. This is kind of like a product market fit type of thing. And I thought this was kind of interesting. There's sufficient drone robot operators exist in the target geography to serve construction survey demand, right? Like, and if this is false and you don't have any inventory, you can validate this by checking Part 107 holders in the target geographies, for example, which is a drone certification, or the sensor sales and whatnot. But this, there's different like user journeys. Like we have the one person who's typing a natural language request to Claude. The agent itself has a specific journey. Anyways, so far and so forth. There's like a bunch of different journeys, like no robots available. There's weather problems. You reject like operator onboarding. I'm not 100% sure. I'm still working through this. And then what this basically has been, I've been progressively increasing the accuracy of this so that I can point an agent to say, hey, I want to work on this part of the project. And then they come up to context by looking at the relationships between the piece that I'm pointing them at and the related aspects that they need to take into consideration. A type of like knowledge / ontology. I assume something interesting was that I think this is almost similar to getting like a business brief, like when you join a company, but it's much more machine readable, and it's a bit like a variables or object definition. So just wanted to share with people in case they're also like doing orchestrating agents. This might be a useful framework for how to think about maintaining your orientation as a whole.
I have a question. What about the, are you making the machine readable parts human readable too? Because One thing that kind of annoys me about like QR codes or whatever is when they just have that and then don't put the link or whatever. Sometimes I want to know what it says.
Yeah.
And personally, when I've been doing my own renovation project, my process for talking to someone about what they're going to do in my house is I have them tell me step by step what they're going to do, what materials they're going to use, and then I have to kind of ask a bunch of questions, find out if I'm allergic to any of those steps because I have so many allergies.
Right.
So, like if you have to break it down enough that a robot knows all these details of the tasks, I would like to have that part be human readable. Human can understand exactly what the robot is going to do.
Yeah. Let me see. Let me see if this demo works so I can show you.
But LLM should help in that, right? So kind of a
Yeah.
translator between.
So let me see. Okay, here it goes. Okay, so the demo is running, and you'll notice that the feed is kind of like delivering. It's actually it took the RFP, which is human readable, and then it converted it into JSON. Okay, so this is like the machine readable component, and then it defined the task. You can see here what the description is, task category, capability requirements, budget ceiling, SLA in seconds, and so on. There's still a lot of work to be done here in terms of the task specification, but then the idea is that a human can actually read the human can actually read like what the machine is actually getting and so on and so forth. And this is also true for the meta. So like even this website, which is the product ontology, it's semi-human readable, and it becomes human readable if you like actually start playing around with it and understanding it in more detail. But yeah, you're right in the fact that there is this entire other meta layer, which is the agents need to communicate to each other. And in an ideal world, by the way, this entire website is just for show. What you would actually do is you click and you connect your agent from a general contractor perspective, and then they just send their bids automatically with like a specific key and authorization in their connection. The website is mostly for show. Okay.
Of tool libraries.
What?
Tool libraries. So in the US, you have these in many cities, like a local library, just like a public book library. There are tool libraries, and you can rent particular kinds of like equipment, like
A screwdriver or like a hammer.
yeah, things that normal people might use like once every couple of years, so they shouldn't own them, but you can rent. It seems to me that instead of like hire a robot, another model to think about is more like robot libraries, because one thing I'm thinking of is, to the extent this needs basically new, I mean, this is mainly interesting only if we can get new kinds of robots into this game, right? Like if you were to build this auction website and you're just like running auctions for existing types of equipment, you're not really doing robotics. So how do you get new types of robotics, like the tumblers that we are building or whatever, into this kind of ecosystem? Libraries might be faster kind of like side channel to hack that market, as opposed to like trying to like create a whole class of entrepreneurs who are like basically buying or building robots for hire. Instead of that, you kind of like do it the other way. The demand comes to libraries. And again, thinking of like a specific model, like say we take the Tumblr thing we are designing and modify it slightly so that it becomes useful for, I don't know, indoor surveying or something.
Yeah.
We have a design. Maybe it's a $200 design. Then the next marketing problem becomes, all right, there's 4 or 5 of us who built it and have connected it into the YaRG network. And now there's like 5 robots in the world that can do this. And we will do some things just by way of experiments. But it gets interesting only if there's, say, you know, a dozen in every major city, maybe 5 major cities, like, maybe there's Seattle and Ulu and Tokyo or wherever, like 5 or 6 major cities. If there's a dozen robots each, then you have like enough liquidity to actually do a market. So how do you get to that stage? I think you kind of have to basically prime the pump. You have to find locations like public libraries or co-working spaces or meetup groups that are willing to basically become custodians of a handful of robots, including capitalizing it. Like, we can buy 1 or 2 robots, but even a $200 robot, if you want a dozen in a city, that's $2,500. Like, I wouldn't be able to afford to, like, create a fleet of robots for Seattle. So this might solve the problem. Like,
So
promote
for the
robot libraries.
so if someone had a gun to my head and said, "You must do this, you must get to the moon and get the robots working," um, I would probably be thinking about doing a business like this one that produces money, and then having an R&D department that basically like moves it forward. So I think that there's a problem around funding here, right? Like you only get a specific speed and distribution depending on how much money you have. And I do think that at some point you have to solve the problem of creating fleets of robot in real physical spaces and distributing them. And obviously it's just not that easy to do without money.
Yeah, that's basically what I was getting at. Like, this is yet another revenue channel. Like, so far we've got one kind of revenue channel, which is you pay to use a robot somebody else is hosting somewhere, right? So you pay,
That's right.
you can control Anuraj's robot for 2 minutes. This would basically create revenue from the opposite stream as well. Like, you
Yeah,
want to be the host of a robot, but you don't want to either build or buy one yourself because you don't have the skills or the money. But then you say, hey, I live in an interesting location. My local library has robots for rent. I basically take a robot on loan for 2 weeks and put it in my backyard, and now anybody can rent it to do stuff. Or I put it in an interesting place, or there is a forest fire going on and I put it there to help monitor the forest fire. Now, this is not quite the construction industry. I don't know how to apply this to the construction industry, but basically it's um, working both sides of the market. So
that's right.
the
Yeah.
demand and the supply is things ready to be teleoperated.
And I think that what I was also thinking about this is that if this imaginary company actually existed, then the company that's actually driving this would do two things. One, you'd be able to see where demand is not served, right? Where you're going to have like supply and demand imbalances, but also you have a trickle down effect on the equipment, which is like you'll get access to, like, there will be more robots, which means more equipment and more pieces that will be able to be used by other people, and it will also like normalize it in general. I don't know. I was like thinking like this specific company, if it produced like if it were successful, then you'd probably start investing in robot R&D and robot libraries and so on and so forth, because everything just like contributes to that flywheel. So I feel like you would, it's yet another revenue channel. And then the question is whether the company itself is actually driving that coordination, or if there's like a protocol TIF, like some sort of contribution, and there's like some foundation which is looking at robot registrations or like robot economic stuff, and you have a tax, right? And that tax is going to the foundation for continuous improvement. And I don't know, like, yeah, lots of open questions.
Yeah, I'm trying to calibrate how difficult this is. Like the closest comparison that comes to mind is the sidewalk scooter market, right? Much simpler. It's not specialized equipment for doing anything. You don't need to stage it in specialized places like construction zones. And what they did was they took tons of low interest VC money, and in
Yeah,
lots of major cities, they just flooded the sidewalks with
they
these.
just flooded it. Yeah,
So this is like if you have money to burn at like very low cost of capital, you can do that. And even then, it was very difficult. But it did
yeah,
do the prime the pump on the supply side, and then the demand was there kind of latently, and it picked up. I'm trying to think. So the reason I was thinking of libraries is if you don't have money to burn, that's a slightly more focused way of like flooding the market. Like think of the opposite. If you have robots like the tumblers, if you had like lots of money to burn and didn't want to do it very smartly, one easy thing you could do is just take our $200 tumbler robots, like with $1 million, buy like how many that is, 10,000 of these robots, and flood the streets with them. Each of them has a QR code. Anybody can take a connect to them with like, and hey, suddenly you're teleoperating a robot or hosting a robot. But that's obviously uh, an unsustainably wasteful way of doing it. So then the question becomes, how do you do that same process much more efficiently? How do you prime the market in a more targeted sort of like smart bombing way? This is like the equivalent of the scooter companies did the equivalent of like carpet bombing the sidewalks with scooters. We kind of have to do smart targeting of limited inventory.
yeah. I think I was thinking. Excuse me. I was thinking yesterday or the day before. I can't remember. It's a bit of fugue state when you're building a vibe coding product. It just like all blurs all together. But I was thinking about the Tesla model about going premium and then trying to like flood the market with like cheaper cars once you like get like better profitability at the high end. And I did think about the fact that um, there was this question about how efficient is the wedge. So if you don't necessarily need to pick this specific construction surveying, but is there like a highly inefficient, like where you can get like a big profit, similar to like what Tesla did with like the premium car or tried to, right? And then to be able to learn from that and then create the mass market one. But you want a wedge which is fragmented and inefficient, where the barrier to consolidation or aggregation is human feasible. So like it's possible. I think in this particular case study, I think it is because there are you can pick a specific state. So you have geographic density. There are usually between 12 and 20 mid-sized general contractors that all know each other. So it's a dense network, but they don't have their human readable demand. And there's an oversupply of drone commercial licenses, apparently. Let's assume these assumptions are true. What I don't know is what the profit margin for surveying is right now. If that profit margin is super low, there's not a lot of wiggle room, even if you do create a market. And that would make the job really difficult because you can't actually, you won't be able to get a lower price on the marketplace than giving someone a phone call, right? So this is some of the stuff that I was thinking about in terms of, would this actually work? But I still think the exercise of finding a case study that produces revenue for robot task execution is a useful question. And I think there's a lot of different ways that you could go about it. Construction surveying being like one of maybe, 1,000 different options. And like you said, Venkat, like even like checking your pipes, right? Like that, someone should probably build a robot for that, right? Like it seemed that all this equipment just seems archaic.
Besides construction, I think like agriculture is another field
Yeah,
where automation could help a lot and reduce costs. So I think drones are also used in like farm surveying, crop surveying. Uh, it's much faster. And these days, I think you can also uh, have this pesticide sprayed with drones.
yeah, yeah. There's a lot, right? Like it feels a bit wide open. The other thing that really feels wide open is I know for a fact that a lot of the spec development is like quite manual work right now. From based on anecdotal evidence, I guess I would have to double check this, but I think agents have a lot of power to disrupt the conversion into machine readable tasks and resolving both data certification, verification, and legal term alignment. All of that feels like greenfield. Takes pretty specialized people to do it, which means it's expensive, and it is a language problem that agents are particularly good at.
Yeah, this is
What
a very
about
promising case study, but it is getting late here. I do have to
Yeah.
log off in a couple of minutes, but yeah,
yeah,
awesome.
we are
Anyways,
almost 10
I'm
minutes
gonna
past.
continue and see how far down the rabbit hole I get. So I'll do another update later.
We can try to assemble the robots and see if the auction market works on actual robots, maybe in a few weeks. But we'll
Yeah,
have to assemble
that
it,
would be great.
assemble the robots with ESP32. So I have it assembled. If Venkat or Eric or Ellen could also assemble.
Yeah, cool stuff. All right, thanks guys.
Okay. Okay.
We'll
Thank
chat.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.